Our next segment today is our Environmental Justice and Student Action panel. We have 4 youths that we've been working with throughout the year on various civic science projects they've been conducting at their schools and taking the lead on. Various topics include hydroponics, waste, bioplastics, and oyster restoration in the Hudson River.
So hi, I'm Luke. I go to Horace Greeley High School in Chapco, New York. I'm a rising senior, so going into 12th grade. And my project title is an investigation on the impact to biodiversity of restoring oysters to the Hudson River estuary. And a few facts about me is that my favorite animals are dolphins and my favorite plant are forsythias. So as I mentioned before, it's an investigation on the impact to the biodiversity of restoring oysters to the Hudson River estuary. So before getting into my research, I wanted to discuss some things that have been really helpful for me in terms of environmental education in my classroom. So what has worked? So one thing is my French class. So my French teacher, Mr. Day, has had a lot of speaking exercises and showed us documentary in French. So we were able to learn French while also exploring environmental topics at the same time, which was a great way of incorporating environmental ideals into the classroom. So I think what I wish was included are some more readings about or like videos on current issues. This could be done in any class, but I feel like this would just be like a good way to learn more about the environment in the classroom. And my inspiration for my project actually comes from my science research class. As in our class, in the sophomore year, we start looking for a mentor to conduct research on a topic of interest, and I found out that I was interested in environmental science, so that's sort of how my entire project stemmed from the class. So getting into the causes of oyster loss in the Hudson River, I want to go back 200 years ago. So if I lived in New York City 200 years ago, I could go to the edge of the Hudson River, pick up an oyster, and eat it. Nowadays, however, due to overexploitation, which was done heavily as 1.5 million bushels were harvested per year, and there was also polluted waters, as you can see on the right, a more modern image, but still happened back then. These were 2 major causes to oyster losses, and the oysters were unable to recover. Now you might be wondering, why is this important? Well, oysters are actually a keystone species. This means that an ecosystem cannot survive without them. They are filter feeders, which means that they make the water clearer, which allows algae and phytoplankton to receive more sunlight and therefore make the ecosystem healthier as it increases the rate of photosynthesis. And they also provide food alongside habitation for animals living in the Hudson River. So because of the immense importance of these oysters, the Billion Oyster Project has dedicated themselves to restoring oysters to the Hudson River. Currently, they've restored 76 million oysters, but as the name suggests, their goal is 1 billion oysters. So they work with harbor schools in the New York City area, and they also work with restaurants in the New York area by giving the shells are given that are consumed, the oysters that are consumed from the restaurants have the shells, and the shells are given to the Billion Oysters so they can be restored back into the New York Harbor. So for my research specifically, I'm going to be working with the Billion Oyster Project, and we're placing oysters in a trap in the Hudson River in an area where oysters have not been placed yet. So we're going to see the direct effect of just initially placing oysters into the river. And then I'm going to be monitoring them by taking photos 3 times a week to examine the change in the number of species or the change in biodiversity. And I'm going to be able to identify the species using iNaturalist and Seek, 2 apps that we mentioned earlier in the week. And then I'm going to be analyzing the data and analyzing the impact that adding the oysters had on the surrounding biodiversity. So the importance of this research is that this demonstrates the importance of oysters. It also determines the viability of restoring keystone species in order to bring back a former ecosystem. And this can also be applied in other regions to naturally restore biodiversity if this study is successful. So some challenges that I did face while starting my project was first finding a mentor, as sending emails to reputable people who might not respond is always a difficult task. And restoring a permit for an oyster reef site was also difficult, as it's a lengthy process, and we initially did not have a permit to place the oysters in the area that we are. So we're currently finalizing that right now. And some help that I received on this was my science research teacher was able to help connect me with my mentor and initially gave me the email and contact for the person that who's now currently my mentor. So in the future, after my research, my idea is to create a billion oyster club at my school. And the goal would be to work with oysters and continuing to build up an oyster reef and continue to monitor change in biodiversity. But one challenge I might have with this is that in order to continue to continue after I leave after this coming year, I would want this club to continue ongoing. So it's sort of dependent on if my sister is still interested in marine science and wants to help me with this club, as she would be able, as an entering freshman, she would be able to help run this club. And if she is interested, I would be able to help her creating this club, which would be, I think, a great opportunity. And thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashley and I'm a rising freshman at the Loomis Chaffee School located in Windsor, Connecticut. And my project title is Bringing Action with Bioplastics. And a few fun facts to just get started with is one, I'm a golfer, and second, I love taking pictures. So bringing action with bioplastics. So last summer, I attended and I participated in a program held by the Columbia University's Center for Sustainable Development Earth Institute, where I discovered the Sustainable Development Goals created by the United Nations, and where I was supposed to specifically research about SDG 14, or life below water. And under that topic, I specifically researched about fast fashion speeding toward ocean pollution. And before I get started, I would just like to give some and talk about my motivation to do the program last summer, which was, I think, primarily due to what my parents do and my parents' work. So with COVID and everything, and just living in home, quarantining, I learned about my parents' job in a more specific way. And I learned that my dad, his job really focused on investing in solar panels and environmental companies. And my mom, she is a um, professor who teaches textile design, and she told me multiple times being home together that she's trying to teach and educate her students about creating and or like utilizing and encouraging them to use sustainable textiles, and teaching them how some of these textiles and fibers that they use to create these bags and accessories can be environmentally harmful. And with these conversation going around my house, I also wanted to contribute to this conversation, so I wanted to start my research on environment as well. So I decided to attend this program, and I chose my topic in fast fashion by zooming in under a really broad topic, which was SDG 14, as I said. So by zooming in, what I mean by zooming in is that I try to explore what I feel passionate about, and I realized that I like shopping and I'm interested in clothes, and I wanted to learn more about the fashion industry. So I decided to try to connect the dots between fast fashion and the environmental harms that it's creating. So that's how I kind of chose my topic. And here are just a few of the slides from my presentation. And overall, this presentation that I did, and this story map that I create, sorry, the story map that I created kind of sparked me, and it was the start of my environmental research. So the key takeaways from this research was that, first of all, I was able to find my passion, that I'm interested in environment and I like furthering sustainability, and I also learned how I'm able to voice myself through my work. And another key takeaway was that I was that this research actually inspired me to start my bioplastic experiment, and that was possible of happening because as I was able as I researched more about fast fashion, I learned how bioplastics, which are just more environmentally friendly plastics, can be used to create clothes. So what that means is that clothes, which are usually created with polyester, are replaced with bioplastics, so it becomes a much more sustainable clothing. So I learned about how that kind of clothing can be actually produced. So I wanted to learn more about it. So I decided to start my own experiment on bioplastic. So here's how it went. So I have two different bioplastics, and the first is agar bioplastic. So for every experiment I did, I just stick the agar to the side, and to the right, I gave specific details about the ingredient, and I also even analyzed these different bioplastics and talked and kind of analyzed on why these bioplastic look in the particular way that it does, or why it feels in the particular way that it does. And aside from agar, I also did alginate bioplastics. And again, here I analyzed it. As you can see, I researched and learned about why some of the alginate bioplastic might be waterproof, and why some might not be. And back to agar bioplastics, as you can see for this one, there's a color into it, and what I wanted to do was that I wanted to try to allow for these bioplastics to have some color, and the only sustainable way that I could think of was to actually use tea bags. So I used the tea bags to create these colored dyes, and you can see that to the left and to the right you can see an artwork that I created out of bioplastics. And again, these two are also artworks that I created out of bioplastic, but this is just a form of alginate bioplastic. And this is one of the most important things that I think I created, and this is bioplastic kits. And I decided to create bioplastic kits because with these artworks, my sphere of influence was very small. Only people around me, like my relatives and my friends and families, only knew about this. But I definitely wanted to expand and further this my own sphere of influence, and I wanted to make that sphere of influence to the public. So I thought that maybe creating a product um, would definitely help me to expand my sphere of influence. So I decided to create these bioplastic kits so that people can try to also make bioplastic kits like me. And while I was trying to create these kits, I learned that having the target consumer as kids would be really helpful, because what I really learned from these research was that it is really important for me, in my opinion, for the younger generation and kids to learn more about the environmental issues than for the older generations, because younger generations are the ones who can actually put some action into it. So I wanted the kids to learn about the environmental issues more on their early age during their childhood. But I also acknowledge that it might be sometimes hard for them to understand these environmental issues. So I thought that um, in order for them to understand these issues, it would be great if I can help them by understand these by doing a hands-on experience. So that's why I created these kits, so that they can actually kind of um, experience a hands-on learning and make these bioplastics, and also learn what bioplastic is, and kind of understand what this entire concept of bioplastic is. And after that, I also created bioplastic keychains, and I created this to again further and expand my sphere of influence to more general public, because keychains are for everyone. And these are actually just few of the keychains that I created during my first few experiments with bioplastics. The ones that I'm currently developing right now are much more sophisticated with the detail and the color, and it is much more creative. So my plans for the future and my next step, I kind of touched upon this, but I am planning on selling it for the public, and am hoping to create more accessories like necklaces and bracelets with this. And I would also like to find a sustainable color dye for this, because these bioplastic keychains that I created, these colors were created with not so environmentally friendly dyes. So I definitely would like to find a sustainable color dye to make the product more sustainable. And I am also trying to make a profit out of these so that I can donate to an environmental organization. And for resources and help, I definitely would like to get some help in acquiring seaweeds from my nearby oceans so that I can actually make the agar powder by myself, which is used to create bioplastics. And what that means is that now I won't have to now buy these powders off of Amazon, and I can actually kind of use my own powder. And I think that will make this project even more unique and feel like it's actually my own project. And I think CELF can also play a great role into this and extend the life of my project, because I think CELF is a great organization where I can reach out so that I can make some connections with different teachers from different backgrounds who can also help me promote my product. And lastly, the most important part, in classrooms. So there are working cases of environmental education, and in order for it to successfully work, I believe that again, hands-on learning is the key. And in my opinion, I think lectures and individual research work rarely works, and hands-on learning is the way to go. So personally, it would be great if we had more time in class where we discussed the connection between a topic and the environment. So for example, in a social studies class, when we're learning about a historical event, we can always make a connection to how that event led to environmental harms, for example. And it would be great if we can get more support from the school and teachers with student environmental work, because that is actually something that I struggled with a lot during my middle school year, was that the school really didn't recognize my work. But I think if the teachers at least try to recognize and support the student work and allow them to present their work in classrooms, I think that would be amazing. And lastly, I would hope for sustainability to be more fully incorporated in the school curriculum. So what I mean by that is that instead of really just talking about environment during like Earth Days, which happens just once a year, we can always try to create more courses related to sustainability and always try to create connections. And thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Rahul. I am a student, a rising junior in Shutter Creek High School in Pearland, Texas. My project title is Hydroponics, a Green Future. And some fun facts about me: I am an aspiring social entrepreneur. I really enjoy biking, whether that's in trails or just around my neighborhood or with friends. And I enjoy watching Gordon Ramsay and his cooking videos. My project is Hydroponics, a Green Future. So for this presentation, I'm going to introduce everyone to what hydroponics is, then I'm going to explain the problem, my solution, and then finally talk about self-support and community outreach. So as a quick introduction into what hydroponic farming is, it is a method of cultivating plants using zero soil and zero GMOs, making it highly sustainable and fresh. And compared to traditional agriculture, hydroponics uses 90% less water and 1/4 less space. So this is just a short, small diagram of what hydroponics looks like. So understanding the problem. So the problem is twofold. It's in the education and nutrition aspect or side of schools. So in the education side, nowadays schools are really focused on textbook learning, which is not very interactive and lacks engagement, which can hamper students' learning ability. And on the nutrition side, many schools, especially American public schools, use reheated and frozen meals, which lack essential vitamins and minerals, leading to adverse health effects, cognitive impact, and can foster long-term unhealthy eating habits. So for the solution, hydroponic farming is a more engaging way to teach many subjects, and it's a real world application, and students can be hands-on and learn throughout the process of cultivating plants, which can lead to a increased cognitive impact. Additionally, on the nutrition aspect, the produce grown by hydroponic systems can be implemented in school lunches, which will combat the frozen and reheated food problem by providing healthy, sustainable, fresh produce. So currently we are in my school, Shadow Creek High School, we have one hydroponic system very similar to the one in the photo, which we'll be using in our AP Environmental Science class as a learning tool to learn about pH monitoring, plant cycle, water cycle, and a variety of topics. And again, that produce will be used to supplement our lunch meals to combat the frozen food problem, which we have, and that is very rampant in our country. And so we are planning on expanding to get 2 more systems in our school, and I'm planning on expanding to all the schools in my district nationwide and even internationally. So any teachers that are listening, if anyone is interested in hydroponics, I would love to have a meeting with you and explain more and provide you with a lot of resources which I have acquired. But moving on to how CELF has helped and can help, we're working with CELF to create a teacher's guide, which can help aid teachers to transition into a hydroponic curriculum. Along with that, the CELF team is a great support for any questions that we have that we might encounter, and we can run by them. And because of CELF's vast network of schools, it's a great networking tool to spread awareness about hydroponics and hopefully allow for a large-scale adoption. And for the community influence, the hydroponic system affects students at home by helping develop long-term healthy eating habits, and it affects schools by changing their nutrition and their education side of how they tackle that, and the community by raising awareness about hydroponics, sustainability, and healthy eating. And so this is my contact information. I would encourage any teachers who are interested to visit my website where I talk more about hydroponics. I have my contact info, and I have a grant tool for teachers to acquire funds. And this is just a photo of 2 photos of the system on our school's launch day, where we had many parents and teachers and students come by to see the system before we launched last May. And we're planning on implementing it, as I said, in our AP Environmental Science class this August. And so this is just, I have created a 6-step plan for teachers to replicate if they want to install the system in their school. But for the spirit of time, I will not go into every detail, but any teachers interested can definitely leverage this framework that I created. And thank you everyone for listening.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jason. I go to Fairchild Wheeler Interdistrict High School in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I am a rising senior. My project title is Young Voices for the Planet, a civic engagement and democracy program. And some about me, I have been an avid robotics fan for the past couple of years, and I am currently the president of our robotics club. I am a singer, actor, and dancer at the Klein Auditorium Memoriam, which is a historic theater here in Bridgeport. And I have also been working at the auditorium for the past 4 years as a technical production intern. So that is a very lucrative business. And I am also a very, very, very big book fan. As you see there, I'm a fanatic. I have had a love of reading from a very young age. So this is my project, the Young Voices for the Planet Civic Engagement and Democracy Curriculum. And basically how it started, I have been working with this organization called Young Voices for the Planet for the past 4 years now. And basically what we do, we go out and we find young voices, and we find young voices within the climate activism community, and we make action films out of them to help and lift up and inspire other young voices and encourage young kids to get more involved within activism and specifically climate activism itself. So we started our democracy curriculum about 2 years ago, I believe. Maybe it will be three now. Because we realized that civic engagement is very important within climate activism, because that was always the one common denominator within all of these activism stories. The civic engagement. And so we also created this action plan for young activists to use, called which is assess and analyze, timetable, collaborate, identify, organize, and news. It also ties into how we teach our young kids and sometimes older kids to network with their local government and use it to uplift their voices within their communities. So something I've always talked about is how amplifying your voice is an extremely important tool across the entire world, and how social media is one of the most effective means of doing so. This is one of the things I teach to my kids whenever I do these webinars, how to amplify your voice by doing webinars like these, or using social media apps like maybe YouTube or Instagram, or even through networking through the news, using your local news sources, or even if you want to go broader, you can use a national news source, which is a bit more difficult, but when there's a will, there's a way. And as you can see here, there have been multiple film festivals that our youth films have been featured in, and these have been shown all across the country. So we very much emphasize the importance of civic engagement and news literacy to our kids, because as we've seen all across the news lately, it is very easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom of the world right now, especially in recent times, which is why this program, this Young Voices for the Planet, was started, because we wanted to take a step back from the doom and gloom of the world and show you some success stories instead of the general everybody dies, that's the end type story. On top of civic engagement, I also wanted to emphasize the importance of accessibility within the climate justice and environmental justice community. The reason that I emphasize this as well so much is because I come from an underprivileged community, which is mostly Black and brown. And when I first got into the climate justice community, I noticed that many of the solutions that I was being offered were not accessible to me, especially when we so emphasize the importance of accessibility and sustainability within our circles. But as you can see from the statistics here, Black and brown communities are much more likely to be alarmed by global warming and climate injustice. But as we can see here, Black and brown communities are not as likely to participate in these conversations simply because it is not sustainable for them to do so. Such in my case, my mother had to work multiple hours a day to keep up our rent, because we lived in a very rundown house. But because our house was so run down, we needed to keep on buying appliances to keep it livable. So my mother and my father worked very long hours, and they could not get into the community as much as they wanted to because they were so busy. And that is the case with a lot of other underprivileged communities that want to get involved. And because the solutions that we have been provided are like solar panels, which can go for like $1,000, which is not very affordable for many people, I've realized that we need to have a real talk about accessibility for other communities besides the cookie cutter ones. So I have created this program that will essentially teach children about the importance of accessibility and intersectionality within the climate community, and also helps children uplift their underprivileged counterparts. And especially if they are underprivileged themselves, it will help them uplift themselves by teaching them the importance of civic engagement and teaching them climate awareness and climate education. So that information is available on our website at Young Voices for the Planet. It should be located under Young Voices for the Planet, Civic and Engagement Democracy Curriculum. Thank you so much for having us.